Next, we have LeBron. We feel like we always talk about LeBron every week. It's a really great topic. He was recently in the news talking about, he kind of is combating this idea and narrative of rest. He's been playing a lot, leading the NBA in the past few games as Anthony Davis and Dennis Schroeder are both out. What are your thoughts on LeBron talking about he doesn't need to rest more and this narrative around resting stars in the NBA?
Well, I think the narrative for him is just that. It's part of his MVP pitch is, man, I play every night. I am there. Like, I am there for my teammates when they need me. That's part of the pitch for him when he's going up against Joel Embiid, who has missed, I'm not sure of the actual number, but a handful of games, right? And will probably miss more. You have to be careful with Joel Embiid's knees, back, and you're going to have to rest him. That said, going into the playoffs, when LeBron has been, he's defies father time somehow in a way that's just not really human. But I still think in the second half, once they get Davis and Schroeder back and they get comfortably ensconced in the top handful, because I don't know that seeding is their biggest concern, you got to get him some nights off. This is a condensed schedule. You've got, or at least back off his minutes. He's playing, they've had 4 overtime games recently. He's been pushing or over 40 minutes in all those games. You got to find a way to get him some nights off just to have the legs. Not worried about injuries. You need him fresh. You need 100% LeBron James and Anthony Davis on this team, because with all due respect to Dennis Schroeder, who's probably their third best player, that drop off from 1 and 2 to the rest of that roster is pretty steep. You've got to have LeBron and Davis. So in the second half, Vogel's got to find a way to talk to LeBron and get his minutes down a little.
When 1 and 2 are LeBron, who's arguably one of the greatest players to ever play the game, and then 2, Anthony Davis, who's just unbelievable. Yeah, that's a hard 1 and 2 to compete against as far as the drop off of talent there. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, players want to play. That's why they play this game, right? So, and LeBron wants to win. So I think that he's willing to do whatever it takes to help his team win. And right now, without Anthony Davis and Dennis Schroeder, someone has to help this team be competitive, and that load goes on LeBron James. And that's just part of being the guy. So I understand the concern, but it's also not forever. And this is only a 5-game stretch. And I understand 4 overtime games, by the way. Yeah. That's a crazy stat. How many, what's the record for overtime games in a short amount of state? That's wild to me. So I think we're kind of blowing this small portion out of the water here, in my personal opinion. But I understand we need something to talk about on a week-to-week basis. But when Anthony Davis and Schroeder comes back, I think we'll see back to a 32-minute per game kind of LeBron James.
Exactly. We are mountaining the molehill here a little bit, but that said, I just, for them, seeding matters less. I think if you're Utah, getting the number 1 seed has a real advantage for you in a way that the Lakers can win on the road, and maybe even the Clippers, who are a pretty veteran team. I don't know that it matters as much to them. So for the Lakers, as long as they're healthy, what matters is they're healthy and stable going into the postseason, right? If they're those two things, are we picking anybody else to come out of the West?
I don't know. I don't know. I saw this really great stat though on the games last night, and it said for the teams that were in the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, they're all sitting around 500 right now, right? Except for the Lakers, and the Lakers have somehow, with the shortest offseason, right? They have somehow been able to be at the top of the West or near the top for the entire season. And I think this is exactly what we're talking about as far as professionalism, discipline, attention to detail. But yeah, if I'm betting on any team to be able to kind of focus on, hey, how do we succeed and manage minutes and manage our health? It's definitely going to be the Lakers. There's no other team that I think comes close. And I think when it comes to home court advantage and the seeding, if you can play more games at home, basketball players, professional athletes, they're all creatures of habit. So if you can kind of just make sure everyone's routine is very similar, then it helps you be able to get into those rhythms and play at a high level, because, your pregame meal is the same. The routine's the same. You know how long it takes to get to the arena. All those little things matter, especially in a time like playoffs when you really have to go back and rely on muscle memory and routine to be successful.
And routine has been blown up this season because of the COVID testing, because of 3 times a day on game day, the condensed schedule, the travel is a little more intense. It's been harder on players. They don't really like to talk about that because it's not a good public complaint, but it's been a much tougher season for them in terms of just being in a rhythm.